Previously on Wine Wars.
So we have niched ourselves out to be wine and Star Wars.
And Star Wars, I understand, yeah.
So should you have Star Wars?
The four of us be with you.
Why don't we use that? That is a really good. You are in.
Yeah.
Wine Wars, the show with four friends who love three things: wine and Star Wars.
Welcome to Wine Wars. You join four of us today as we sniff, sip, and talk about wine from our excellent host's home, Mr. Jeff Cox of the Wine Maniacs, who's really kind of he's like the fifth Beatle.
He's the fifth Beatle for sure. He's
of
the
the
fifth
Wine Maniacs.
And Darth Vader.
And yep.
And
With
Darth
us
Vader.
With us always is Garth.
Damn it! I'm your penultimate host, Scott. With me as always is Jason.
Hello.
Our fifth Beatle, Mr. Jeff Cox from Wine Maniacs.
Hello.
And we have a special guest tonight. Wine Maniacs, again, had an excellent winemaker pairing dinner. Mr. Bill Bishop from Steele Wines.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for being here.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So we quite often get invites from Jeff saying, hey, we have a winemaker dinners going on, but this one in particular, we're told you need to come to this. This is a very special event going on, and it really was
Very wise man.
He is a wise man.
very unique.
He never calls except for when it's important.
So prior to this, Jason and I did not have any of your wines before, so it was all new to us. But looking at your website, it's a very prolific profile. So
Truly.
what was it? I think 22 grapes.
22 grapes, we make 42 many wines.
42 many.
42 many, yeah.
I see what you're saying.
So it's a very diverse cast of wines. You have like essentially every continent covered. So you
Pretty
had like
much,
Tempranillo, Spain. You got all of France, Italy.
Triga Nacional. Yes.
I don't even know what that is.
There were Blancs on there I never saw before.
Blaufränkisch.
Blaufränkisch,
Yep.
Cunoise.
Yeah.
Cunoise.
Yeah.
That's good
There
shit,
was a,
man.
a
It's good shit.
Blue Franc?
Blue Franc, that's our Blaufränkisch.
Yeah.
Blue Franc is a proprietary name that we came up with that Jed Steele coined back about 20 years ago because nobody knew the grape Blaufränkisch, which is also known as Lemberger, and it's a grape originally grown in Alsace, France, that Napoleon, when he was emperor of France, brought to Germany and Austria, and it became the most popular red grape in Austria back in the 17, 1900s. Well, and they realized it was cold climate savvy.
Sure.
Grapes have very small brains. They don't realize that you get January thaw, it's like 70 degrees out, lather up, put the suntan lotion on, boom, 10 minutes later it's 20 below zero. They don't like that. Most of them don't. The Blaufränkisch grape can handle that huge temperature differentiation. So you started seeing it grown up in the Finger Lakes in New York back in the 50s and 60s, and up in the Leelanau Peninsula of Michigan back in the 60s into the 70s, and up in Washington State, the Columbia River Valley of Washington State. Jed Steele, the owner of Steele Wines, the winery I work with, he went to college up at Gonzaga in Spokane, Washington, and he became familiar with the grape up there back in the late 60s, early 70s. And he said, we got to make this. We got to make this wine. It's very cool. So when he started his own winery back in 1991, we started making this wine where nobody knew Blaufränkisch, or it's also known as Lemberger, which I think was a French, just when the Germans goofing on the French. Because, Blaufränkisch, red French grape, when it went from Alsace into Germany, they said, we can't have French in the name of the grape. Let's call it Lemberger and goof on it. Make it sound like a stinky cheese.
Yeah.
But it sounds too much like the cheese.
Right,
Sounds like
exactly.
cheese,
Yeah. So Jed started making this wine, and at that time, the BATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which you throw guns and alcohol and drugs together, it's all good, man.
It's a good
all
party.
Yeah, it's balanced. It's a balancing act. So they didn't recognize Blaufränkisch as the name of the grape, so we had to call it Lemberger. So what Jed did when he, in his infinite wisdom, or sub-infinite, I don't know, it's a gray area in there, He took a antiquated French franc note and put a blue hue to it and took off Bank of France and the denomination and came up with the idea of calling it Blue Franc. And there's a bottle sitting right over there on the porch. I think I see one.
Oh, you do.
This is very cool. You guys haven't seen this yet, have you?
No.
Oh, you gotta drink it too.
This is real?
We actually glass poured this.
Yeah.
Really?
This is an old French franc paper money, and took off Bank of France and the denomination, and the paper money was red, so we changed it to blue. And years ago, this is the smallest legal print we could put in there. We said Washington State Lemberger, but we changed it. We said, well, let's call it. Coin the term in copyright, call it Blue Franc, because it's Blau Frankish. Now we can call it Blau Frankish because the TTB, the next generation of the BATF, has recognized Blau Frankish as the original name of the grape. But we kept the artwork because it stuck. Cool. It was very, very cool. So the paper money had a watermark for security purposes. There was a crest on there. So every year we put the ghost image of a friend who's a whimsical character and give them 10 cases as royalties, which allows us to laugh with them rather than at them. And over the years we've had Jed Steele went to college at, as I say, UC Davis and studied with a lot of, contemporary winemaker friends and such. Randall Graham started Bonnie Doon, Jim Clendenin started Aubin Clement, Andy Quaddy from Quaddy Ports, Jim Bunshoe from Gunlock Bunshoe, all these characters, Mike Martini, what have you. So we put those guys on initially years ago, but now over the years we've kind of spread it out to friends and family and what have you. This is Mike Veck, who owns the St. Paul Saints minor league baseball team with the actor-comedian Bill Murray. Mm-hmm. And his dad, Bill Veck, had owned the Chicago White Sox back in the 70s and hired 3'7" Eddie Goodell.
Right. As the pinch hitter.
Yeah, as a pinch hitter, because there was no strike zone. He was 3'7". and Bill Veck would tell him, don't take that bat off your shoulder. I got a sniper up in the top there, and I'm going to shoot you if you try to swing your bat. So he's just like to sit there, and then they'd throw 4 balls, put him at first base, and they'd put in a pinch runner who's fast. Yeah. So he is whimsical enough to be on the label. Mike has the St. Paul Saints in Minnesota, and they just built a new stadium for him last year, and he said he was going to honor Jed Steele by he was going to put a little wine bar in there called the Shooting Star Wine Bar. Oh, cool. So we put Mike's image on there this year.
That is cool.
It's a great wine. You really should grab a glass and taste the stuff.
Is this dead or is that good?
It's dead.
It's dead.
How dead? It's dead. It died gracefully, but it still died. I like to describe it as blueberry-like aromas, the fruitiness of Zinfandel, yet the delicacy of Pinot Noir, somewhat akin to a Cru Beaujolais or an Italian Dolcetto. And it's you have to want to sell it. You have to want to get behind the wine because it's not going to walk off the shelf. Not everybody has not had their Blau Francas yet today.
Yeah.
So
it's a wonderful soft.
It's easy drinking. It's very, very cool. Goes with beer.
And stuff.
Sounds like it would be a good grape to grow in Wisconsin, really.
Mm-hmm. It might.
Nothing seems to work here. That would seem like
if I was going to grow a grape here, there's a grape that was grown up in Minnesota called St. Croix. I don't know if you're familiar with St. Croix variety.
I have a batch of that at my home.
Are you making a homemade St. Croix? Excellent. I would like to taste that.
I'm sure it won't be that great.
Well, you never know.
Give me a few years to work it out.
I've had a few from Minnesota. Alexis Bailey Winery used to make one up there. On their label it says, where the grapes deserve to suffer in Minnesota. The grapes up that way. But there's a winery, Sharp Hill Winery in Connecticut, that makes one, and it tastes like a Rhone wine. It's a really cool variety. I've had a couple from Connecticut because it's a little bit cooler, a little bit warmer area that didn't have the winter kill issues, but St. Croix is a really cool grape variety. Get off the subject real fast, don't I?
Oh, that's great.
So that's 1 of 42 wines.
1 of 42 wines.
41 to go.
All right.
Yeah, we got Aligoté, Barbera, Counoise, Durif, which is also known as Petit Syrah. We got A, B, C, D. We're working up for the alphabet there. So
that's impressive.
We got them all covered as such. But yeah, we got some good stuff.
So is there a like an ethos behind that to try all these different grapes?
Well, Jed Steele's never seen a grape he didn't like. It's not a bad thing. So we like to experiment with things that are just a little left of center, and it just kind of happens that we continue to make them because we find homes for them out in the marketplace. There are a few people here and there that like to drink things that are not Cabernet, Chardonnay, whatever.
For sure.
And I mean, this wine, nobody knows Blaufränkisch or Lemberger's a grape. I mean, a few people do, but we sell 3,000 cases a year of that stuff. You know, it's very, very cool wine. You know, it's well worth checking out.
Yep.
It's fun.
Yeah, that was the one on there that I was like, that is striking.
Sorry we didn't have that for dinner tonight. That would have been a fun one to throw in the dinner.
You know, the only reason we didn't is we've glass poured it for a year.
Yeah.
You know, so most of our customers really know it. So there were going to be no surprises there.
Yeah.
Well, we got some other ones out there we could have surprised them with, but that one.
So 3,000 cases. What's like?
How many
size
gallons?
Yeah, how many
that?
gallons are you?
Well, a case of wine is 2.37885. You know, 2.3785. You know, my wife's an accountant. She deals with things, and then they those tax guys, they go down to the dram. You know, they get down close to that. But you know, 3,000 cases is about 7,000, 8,000 gallons, something like that.
Are you doing like one vat?
Yeah, well, I think one or two.
Yeah.
And we have it custom crushed up in Washington. The fruit's from Washington State. We have it custom crushed locally up there, and then we bring it down in stainless steel refrigerator tanker trucks to our winery in California, and then we do a slight oak aging for a couple months, and then bottle it up and sell it to Jeff and all his friends.
That's a technique I haven't heard of before, where it's actually crushed and then
Custom crushed elsewhere.
Custom crushed.
Well, we'd rather do that than bounce the grapes, 500 miles in a gondola and oxidize them.
Yeah,
Because they lose a lot.
You won't lose the juice. I mean, you'll be in the bottom of the gondola, sloshing around, but the juice will get oxygen on it, and then it'll kind of mute the fruit. And so by crushing it locally up north, and we do the same thing with fruit we get from Santa Barbara. We get Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and Pinot Blanc out of Santa Barbara, which is 300 miles south of us. And we crush that down in Santa Barbara and bring that up in refrigerated stainless steel tanker trucks and do all the processing and aging at our winery up in Lake County up north of Napa.
Cool.
It makes it a very homogeneous California wines that you're producing.
Well,
it's not just from this one
Oh
small
yeah,
area.
we're not we are site specific on a bunch of our wines up in Lake County and in Mendocino, and we pride ourselves on making a lot of single vineyard wines, either Chardonnay or Pinot Noir or Zinfandel or occasionally Syrah, that are single vineyard site wines, but. We do process them all in the same place, and it's just one winemaker. Jed's been making wine for 47 years now.
Yeah.
He's getting it down pretty well. He's getting there.
So when you say single vineyard on the bottle, it doesn't necessarily mean it's produced from a Lake County vineyard.
It just means that the grapes were grown in one particular vineyard. They're not estate grown. We have long-term contracts on a handshake. People who we've dealt with for 20, 30, in some cases 40 years, that we have relationships with. Jed does own 75 acres of vineyard land, which gives us about 25% of our fruit. The remaining 75% are long-term contracts with growers either in Washington State or Santa Barbara or the Carneros or Sonoma or Mendocino and Lake County. We own vineyards up in Lake County, but we also deal with a lot of independent farmer growers up there that Jed's been working with in some cases 30, 35, 40 years.
So Lake County is not for someone from the Midwest, it's not a super well-known region. Could you tell us a little bit more about the region and how it works within the northern California?
It is becoming more and more recognized as a place to look for grapes for several reasons. Years ago, and we're talking 100 plus years ago, it was the northern half of Napa County. So they segregated the northern half of Napa County back in 1861. The governor in Sacramento, California, and created this new county, Lake County. It was mostly the northern half of Napa, a little bit from Mendocino County to the west, a little bit to the east from Colusa County, and created this new county called Lake County as an homage to the largest natural lake fully contained in California, Clear Lake. all the other lakes in California are dammed up rivers, like Shasta or New Melones, the old Stanislaus River.
And Clear Lake is actually kind of a misnomer.
Yeah, because it's not that clear. It's muddy. It's a muddy lake. But, and Lake Tahoe is half California, half Nevada. Right. So it's not but Clear Lake, they created this county called Lake County, and it was the northern half of Napa 150 years ago. So we were due north of Napa, northeast of Sonoma, due east of Mendocino, about 70 miles inland off the ocean. Vineyard sites go from about 1,500 feet elevation to about 3,000 foot elevation above sea level. And you get prevailing winds coming off the Pacific Ocean heading west to east. They say it's some of the cleanest air in California. It's you're 150 miles north of San Francisco. There's no big cities up that way. The largest city in Lake County is probably Lakeport with 5,000 residents as such.
Wow.
Yeah. Kelseyville is maybe 2,000 or 3,000. Lower Lake, not that many. It's really kind of a remote area. It's kind of that golden triangle area between Humboldt County and Mendocino County and Lake County, where there's other cash crops that do rather well up there.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I wouldn't.
Wow. That's awesome stuff. The
great story.
Wait a minute. He just took a toke there and he held it in. That's what it was.
I was just the whole part about Napa being broken off like that.
We're 30 miles north of Calistoga. Calistoga is the northern end of Napa Valley, where Chateau Montelena is, or Sterling Winery.
That's where you guys are located?
No, we're in Kelseyville. We're 30 miles north of Calistoga.
Okay.
We're on Highway 29. Highway 29 is the main drag through Napa Valley. Right. You go from Napa up through from Yountville up to Oakville, Rutherford, St. Helena, Calistoga, and then Highway 29 kind of snakes around Mount St. Helena, goes into the town of Middletown, over to Lower Lake, and then loops up around the west side of Clear Lake, and then Kelseyville is where we're at. As the crow flies from Calistoga, we're about 25 miles, but it's a 45-minute drive because you kind of go these windy switchbacks going up through that way. But it doesn't have the cachet of Napa or Sonoma. Hence, land is a fraction of the price up there, and you get great value.
Yeah,
really, really great value for the wines.
And you can make way better wines for way less money without carrying all that land cost.
Right, absolutely.
The wines that I always think of from Lake County would be like Gwinnett and Brassfield.
Yep.
Right.
And I always thought of Brassfield as kind of being volcanic.
Yep, and they're on the over on the east side of Clear Lake at higher elevation, and they've been around for 10 or 15 years now, and they're pretty well known. The other one over there that way would be Shannon Ridge Winery, which does real well. We're on the other side of the lake, and there is a volcanic outcropping from Mount Konocti, a dormant volcano, and then there's a lot of obsidian outcropping. That's why our Cabernet is called Red Hills area, because there's the black rocks with the soil make it almost look red as such. And it's a pretty special spot. It's, Andy Beckstoffer, one of the big growers in Napa Valley, bought 900 acres up there back in 1999, and he has 2,000 acres in Napa Valley, but he added another 900 up in Lake County, has another 1,000 up in Mendocino. Serious land whore, I'll tell you. He just likes that dirt.
So what kind of effect does that volcanic soil have on your...
Mostly drainage. It's really good for drainage. You don't want grapes sitting in moisture and getting too much water into the vine. Granted, we've had drought conditions for the past 4 years, but in general, the volcanic soil, I think, is really a good drainage aspect of the vineyard. So you get more intensity, more concentration of fruit character, and the high elevation. It's hot during the day. It gets up to 100 degrees pretty regularly there during the daytime, but it drops down to 50 or 55 at night. So the heat of the day gives you this ripe fruit, but the coolness of the evenings allows the vines to shut down. You get below 55 degrees, and those vines kind of go into stasis for a little bit, and so they retain their acidity. So you get bright, fresh fruit that has ripe fruit character to it with good acidity still.
So they're kind of like aging almost half speed.
Yeah,
in a way,
yeah,
right?
yeah, they are. And that being said, you have a longer hang time in the
Right.
vines. The grapes hang on the vine longer. So you have a longer growing season from March when you get bud break to September or October when you get harvest. So traditionally, you figure 100 days from flowering to harvest. It could be stretched out a little bit longer in Lake County, so you get more complexity, more intensity of the fruit because of that coolness of the evenings shutting things down.
That's really interesting.
Shutting down the maturation on the vine.
Yeah.
So from you guys have 75 acres.
Yeah, that Jed purchased parcels here and there starting back in the mid-90s. We grow Zinfandel, we grow Syrah, we grow Cabernet Franc, we grow Merlot, we grow Counoise, which is traditionally a blending grape with Châteauneuf de Pape in the Rhone region. We grow Trigo Nacional, which is traditionally a port-style grape from Portugal, and that's the bulk of them, I guess. A lot of Zin, and some Petit Syrah too. We grow some Petit.
Is Zin kind of common for that? It seems like what I've seen most.
Zin in Lake County, Zinfandel for red wines is probably the big one, and Syrah, although Cabernet is becoming quite popular up that way. And then for white wines, it's Sauvignon Blanc is king up there. Great, clean, crisp Sauvignon Blancs. Viognier does well up there. We have a little bit of Roussanne, traditional Rhone variety up there that does real well. You don't see much Chardonnay up that way. We have a high elevation spot. We grow a little bit of Riesling, but it's as an anomaly. But it's really Sauvignon Blanc, Viognier, and Roussanne would be the white wines to grow up there. And then Zin, Syrah, and then Cabernet are the predominant red wines, although there are some sites. We have a site where we grow some Pinot Noir that's pretty cool up there, that no pun intended. But
you guys do some Pinot Noirs. We didn't have any of those tonight.
no, we didn't, unfortunately, for whatever reason.
That's why he's the fifth Beetle.
That's right, yeah.
Well, actually, that's so. Of this large catalog that they produce, so we had, I think, 8 different wines tonight. So
Yep.
what of those jumped out to you to say that this is what you want to highlight from their catalog?
You know, the big thing is the cab is the Steele Red Hills cab is really interesting because it's big cab. It has amazing structure, but it's still soft. It has an elegance to it that's really pretty remarkable that you don't typically see out of Napa. You know, it's not massive. It's not overwhelming. It doesn't totally take over your palate and drop you on your head. The Malbec, I thought, was the best domestic Malbec I've ever had.
It's very cool.
It's amazing.
It was great.
Yeah. From our tasting, I was like, that is the most interesting.
It's
soft.
Just released. It's got this bright, fresh cherry-like fruit to it, but soft tannins in the background. It's not as angular and sharp as what you see from South America.
Right.
As such, it's really a very, very cool wine. I'm very pleased with that.
Yeah, that was great.
And at the end of the day, the Zins were really fun because you had 3 totally different styles of Zins, all produced by the same guy.
Yeah.
We could have done totally 3 different Pinot Noirs, though, too.
Exactly. But then
We'll
we
have
would
you
have
back
been at
Next time.
Then we would have been at 11 wines.
So what's
we
the
We
problem?
wouldn't be
here
starting
now.
until 3 o'clock in the morning.
So it was really fun because you get a lot of really over-extracted Zins coming out of Napa.
High alcohol.
Even coming out of Dry Creek now, you know. And so to get really narrowly defined Zins in one shot from one producer was really fun. And then to hook them up with peanut butter, how can you screw that?
Yeah. You should mention what happened tonight with that dessert.
Yeah, we took 3 amazing Pinot Noirs and we did a peanut butter.
Zinfandels.
They were amazing Pinot Noirs, but
See what you did to me?
I know.
Plant the seed, drop me on my head.
Right.
So we did 3 really
Easy
amazing
bounces.
Zins. I can learn slowly, but I drink. So we did a deconstructed peanut butter sandwich at the end of the day. And I can't remember which was which anymore, but the really jammy Zin with the licorice or with the
that was the Puccini Vineyard.
The Puccini
Vineyard, yeah.
was absolutely amazing. And when you tasted that right on the front of your palate, it tasted like grape jelly.
Yeah.
So one of our chefs said, "Oh my God." And that started the whole peanut butter kick. And then we did the peanut butter fudge.
Yes.
Yeah, it rocked. That was very cool.
That was
Dense,
really
rich.
fun.
And
then
the fudge was amazing.
Which zin was that?
That was the Catfish Vineyard. That's a
Catfish,
vineyard.
that's
That Jed owns those two vineyards. The Piccini Vineyard was planted in 1940. It's 90% Zin, 10% Petit Syrah, field blend, dry farmed, head trained vineyard, planted over in the western slope of the Mayacamas Mountains in eastern Mendocino in the hamlet of Talmadge, just south of Ukiah. And it's our vineyard manager, Steve Talicki, lives over there and manages that property for us. And then Jed has a 7-acre vineyard called Catfish Vineyard that was planted in 1901. So we have some really cool old vine zins. And the Catfish Vineyard is old Italian field blend, predominantly Zinfandel, but there's some Alicante Boucher, which is a very cool grape because it's one of the few red grapes that has red juice. It's not, you don't get the color extraction from the skins.
Right.
Really?
So you have that, and then you have Carignan, or Carrigan, what the local farmers call Carrigan.
Carrigan.
American Carrigan.
Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy's sister. And then some Petit Syrah grown in there too. And there's one vine of gray Riesling that just adds that, that je ne sais quoi.
Wow. And those all survived
115 years.
And Prohibition. And all that.
Yeah, exactly.
no phylloxera.
Yeah, no phylloxera up there. I mean, the vines are. We've been transplanting as 100 years old. They're like rickety.
Yeah.
You know, they're. So we are starting to transplant and put new Zin vines in there here and there. But the bulk of the vineyard are these like monster-based, gnarly vines. Very, very cool place to come visit. You guys have to come and do it sometime.
Sure.
You're due.
But to actually come up with a wine that is perfect with peanut butter
It's
is
a
pretty
great balance. Great balance.
It was. Jason had mentioned this that we've been to a few. Well, Jason's been to more than I, but these winemaker dinners, like you should do a best of
right.
feature, and that dessert was.
That dessert was very cool. I do a lot of these dinners. I've been doing a lot of these dinners for 30 some odd years, and that's the first time I've had 3 desserts in one setting, and 3 wines for each of the desserts. You know, that was a very cool concept. I like that. That was great.
Each of the little desserts stood on their own.
Right.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
wines stood on their own, and
Right.
when you got to mix and match, it was
fun.
Really magical, fun thing.
Yeah.
So, and the third zin was the Writer's Block.
Writer's Block. That's a label that Jed Steele's son Quincy Steele developed about 13 years ago while he's waiting for his dad to retire. They're saying Quincy was born with a silver Tastavan in his mouth. He's been hauling hoses since he was 2 years old around his dad's winery, and when he was in college he had issues writing in term paper, so he created this label with a couple of his buddies and put Shakespeare on the label with a decanter of wine and have his friends write these crazy diatribes on back that don't tell you a thing about the wine, but loosely translates into that this is the perfect elixir to loosen the ink out of the pen. Drink a bottle of Writer's Block, you'll write prose like a pro, you'll be a poet before you know it. And he's worked at Derenburg in Australia, he's worked at Catena in Argentina, he's worked for Alex Gamble in Burgundy.
Really?
Yeah, that was his past fall. Alex is a great guy, American expat over there. And the Writer's Block wines, it's Lake County fruit that he's been working with some friends that are growers up there, does wild yeast fermentations and a little more edgy, but very, very solid wines.
Yeah.
And, so it was a great compliment to see the dad's wines versus the kid's wine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they mixed right in.
Yeah.
Like, no problem.
Dad won 2-1. It was 2 of his wines versus the kid's wine. Yeah.
Well, you know, lineage.
Yeah, lineage thing. Yeah.
So if we could take a big step back, so for yourself, how did you get into the wine business?
You know, it started when I was 8 years old. You didn't know
That's a very big step.
That's a big step. That's a big step. I was just a young little whipper and a snapper, and my
I need
dad.
to order a pizza.
Yeah, this is a very cool story because my dad was I grew up in Connecticut and northern Maine, and really my early years, my formative years, were in northern Maine, where my dad was a fly fishing guide and a deer hunting guide and fur trapper. The 4-legged furs, not the 2-legged beavers, you know, those kind of things. Yeah. And he was a bohemian before beatniks became hippies. He was one of those kind of guys.
He's an OG.
Yeah, he blew off the family biz down in Connecticut and moved up to live off the grid in a 1-room log cabin back in 1930.
Whoa.
And
There was barely a grid back then.
And that was a good time to be off it, too.
Yeah, it was a good time to be off it.
Yeah.
It didn't really, it was kind of spotty back then. That grid was really spotty. So he spent most of his adult life as a fly fishing guide and deer hunting guide for the likes of Ted Williams and Kurt Gowdy and Jimmy Stewart. And back in the 30s, Calvin Coolidge was a friend, and he guided him. Well, in 1958-59, one of his sports he used to guide was a guy named Bates Slocum, who owned a wine wholesale and importing company with a guy named Bonsall Segerman in Connecticut. And when my dad got to the point where, in 1960, my dad was 58 years old, and trapping wild fur was becoming politically incorrect at the time. So, and he was 58, and he wasn't going to trounce around on snow. This is before snowmobiles were around. They were doing it all in snowshoes up in the woods, and so he decided he wasn't going to trounce around in the winter on snowshoes anymore. And he had a young family, and it was his third family. Hey,
But it was young.
My oldest sister is 7 years older than my mother.
Holy.
You can only do that like in Kentucky or Tennessee, I think. But
I'm going to need a flow chart.
my dad was married in 1924. Married a lady who was a stockbroker in New York. Worked on Wall Street pre-crash.
Pre-crash.
They divorced. They had a daughter. They divorced. The daughter and the mom moved to Paris, and then eventually to Scottsdale, Arizona. And then he married another lady and had a daughter by her, and that kind of went south real fast. Then he said, I'm out of here. So he moved up to Maine, where my grandfather had these camps up in the woods. And he decided to lay low for 20 years. And then after World War II, he met my mom. He was 52, she was 23, 29 years difference. So my mom is 23, my mom was 25 when I was born, and my oldest sister was 27, or actually at that time she was 30.
Whoa.
So my oldest
Third
half
time's the
sister, yeah. My second oldest half sister lives in Appleton. She's moved to Wisconsin back in 1962 and ran Girl Scout camps all over the northern part of Wisconsin way back when. I'm going to go see
Northern
this.
Wisconsin, that's where men are men and women are too.
Yeah, they are. They sure are, yeah. So you asked about how do I get the wine visit? How do I know?
Yeah.
So Bates Slocum,
8 years old.
8 years old, Bates Slocum. My dad says, I'm not going to be trapping anymore. So you got a gift for gab. Why don't you come sell wine for a living? I'll hire you to be a wine sales rep. In 1962, 61, 62. I'm 8 years old. He plays daddy daycare. I'm riding around when my dad is a wholesale sales rep going to package stores in Connecticut selling wine. I did a little bit of spirits. I sold Osbach, Uralt, German brandy, Jägermeister.
Yeesh.
In 1962, 63,
Wow.
in the day. And then they were there was an importer out of Boston, S.S. Pierce, which was this big food and wine importing company, and they brought in Louis Latour Burgundies. And like we're talking Corton Charlemagne, the good juice, the good shit there. So he started selling wine and famous grouse scotch they had back then. Well, it was 90 proof, not an 86 proof shit there. It was good stuff. It was good juice. So I was 8 years old. I'm riding around daddy daycare listening to AM rock and roll radio while he's running around to the wine shops and restaurants. In the 60s.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, my first conscious wine memory is 1964 Thanksgiving. 10 and a half years old. We're having Thanksgiving dinner at the house. Roxbury, Connecticut. Very cool little town. And my dad said, oh, I got this bottle. It's a sample bottle I got out of the distributorship. 1961 Chateau Margaux.
Oh, Jesus.
So I drank Margaux at release.
Oh, you were totally screwed.
I know, I was. I got juiced fast.
I know.
So we always had wine around the house is the bottom line. So when I got to college, I worked in a wine shop in 1975 when I was 21 years old, street legal in all 50 states, man. And I was hoisting beer cases in the cooler and dusting bottles on the shelf, and it turned into the path of least resistance. And before you know it, I was was selling wine retail in the shop. I sold wine wholesale through a distributor to wine shops, doing the same thing my dad had done earlier. My dad used to steal wine out of my wine cellar. He drank my 66 Chateau Aubailly Pauillac back in the day, and I'm always still pissed at him for doing it, man. And then, so I worked for a wholesale distributor for a couple of years. I visited Napa in 1978, said low humidity and no mosquitoes, and grow grapes there. So after a couple of years, I moved out to California, went to UC Davis, and moved to Napa. And after living up in the woods of Maine, I said, I can do this on a bicycle with a tent and a sleeping bag, and kind of crawled into the valley, stealth. Nobody caught me, and slept in Robert Mondavi's vineyards for a week or so until I got hired on at a little winery just turned out called Farniente. That's not Farniente. Farniente. And Gil Nickel was kind enough to hire me and let me live at the winery in a travel trailer. So I'm from homeless in a tent to white trailer trash in Napa Valley in 1982, Labor Day weekend '82, and worked there for the harvest of '82. And I was going to go back to Davis, but I got hired on at another winery, Carneros Creek Winery. Spent 19 years there, hooked up with Jed 2001, and been with him for 15 years now, and get paid for my hobby. Why get a real job?
Why get a real job?
Yeah, my last real job was mowing lawns in high school and as a newspaper boy for the Danbury News-Times in Connecticut way back then.
It's amazing.
So one other aspect of your history that wasn't necessarily touched on that you told us during the dinner. So, and I'm going to pronounce this word incorrectly, but oenologist?
Enologist.
Enologist.
Enology. Enos was the Greek god of wine. Bacchus was the Roman god of wine. Enology is the science of winemaking. Viticulture is the science of grape growing. When I had my undergraduate degree was in business marketing. Give me $5 to say your shirt off your back right now. $5, $2.50. That's my top offer. That's all you're gonna get. And I worked in this. I went to Bryant University out in Rhode Island, got a degree in business marketing, and sold wine for a couple of years. But I decided I wanted to live in Napa Valley, and University of California, Davis is one of the premier research wine institutes in California and across the country. I studied enology, which is the science of winemaking, and the viticulture. I worked in the viticulture department doing research on nematodes. Nematodes are the Zymphonema index is the genus and species of nematodes that we were doing research on because they were the vector for fan leaf virus. And Dr. Goheen at UC Davis was a plant pathologist, and Dr. Rasky was the nematologist, and Lloyd Leiter was the viticulture professor. And I worked in the department working with these three professors on the viticulture side, and then on the enology side, it was what was his name there?
Shit just got serious up in here.
Yeah,
I know, way too serious. No,
you could make up a name and I'd believe it.
Yeah, it's all good.
I can't remember
Steve
my dad's
Stevenson.
name.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Steve. It was Frank Stevenson. That's
There you go.
Yeah, right. No, it was Vern Singleton, is who it was. Vernon Singleton. And that's a true story. That's a true story.
Sure it is.
And yeah, right. You go look at the old time enology
I'm going to
professors.
start Googling.
You start Googling. Vern Singleton. It was
Fact check.
This is Vern Singleton from UC Davis. He taught there from the 40s up until the 80s, and he was my advisor. With Dr. Cornelius O was the department chairman, and that was when Winkler was there, and all these guys, great professors. They were the last of the old school professors before the new foo-foo kids started coming through, and one of which was Dr. Bolton. Dr. Bolton was he got into enology, science kind of stuff, and then Ann Noble, who was the sensory analysis enology professor who created the flavor wheel, the UC Davis flavor wheel, and I was involved with that project back in the early '80s and such. So after I left, when I was graduating from Bryant back in '78, I decided to take a trip around the country on Amtrak, do like my Eurail pass cheap around the U.S., $300 go around the whole country, and visited friends in Michigan and Chicago, and then up to Bozeman, Montana, up to Seattle, ended up down in San Francisco, and got to go hang out in Napa. And said, low humidity and no mosquitoes. I got to live here someday. Then went down to LA and across to Texas and to Jacksonville, Florida, and back up the coast, and started working for a wholesale distributor for a couple of years. And I said, I'm going to quit and go to Davis. got accepted at Davis in the enology program. I applied for grad school to get a master's, but I hadn't studied chemistry since high school. Said, we can't let you into the graduate school, but we'll let you into the undergraduate school. And I created an independent major where they gave me credit for my business background. And I took viticulture classes and enology classes, and it was an independent major, small winery management. And I started taking the classes in enology and working in the vit department. And halfway through it, I said, I'm just learning cookbook chemistry here. I'm not getting my hands dirty. So I got on my bicycle with a tent and a sleeping bag, went over to Napa and went and found a job and never left. So I've been there for 34 years now.
Wow. It's cool.
It's living the dream,
way better than
man.
Lemony Snicket's.
Yeah, Lemony Snicket. I don't know. So yeah, so I just kind of, it was like I said, it was a path of least resistance. It was always, wine was always around the house with my dad, and my mom enjoyed fine wines, and just kind of fell into it on the retail side, and then wholesale side. And the irony is, the wholesale distributor I worked for in 1978, 79, and 80. After I left them, when I worked for them, they sold Carneros Creek wines, they sold Farniente wines, and then I leave, and later I work for Jed Steele, and they sell Steele Wines today. So I've had a working relationship with this company, Worldwide Wines in Connecticut, for 40 years.
Wow.
That doesn't happen very often. This
So
wine.
I seized up 20 minutes ago when you told me you had 61 Margaux.
61 was a good one. That was a good one. Yeah. Well, when I was at Davis, I drank all the 61s, all Lafite, Latour, Margaux, Aubryon. We had them. They're all in the UC Davis library there. They had an incredible. All these alums would donate wines. It was a huge cellar there.
Wow.
Just amazing.
That was one of my epiphany moments in the wine business. I was at a Christie's auction in Chicago in like 84.
Well, that was the day when they did those Christie or Hugh Blind or Hart and Hart.
And Michael Broadbent was actually the auctioneer that
Nice.
day, which was amazing. But they did a total horizontal of all the 61 great growth Bordeaux.
Nice.
Everything but Petrus.
Yeah.
But it was, and that was the moment I understood the meaning of dry wine. Because you took a small sip and there was not a scintilla of moisture left in your entire head. And it's like, okay, I get it.
Those are amazing wines back then. The 61 first growth Bordeaux's. I kicked myself for not buying a bottle of 61 Petrus. We sold it in the shop that I worked in back when I was in college, $80 on the shelf, and I didn't buy it. But at the same time, I did drink 61 Richebourg from Domaine de la Romicanti, which is my first DRC wine, and that was pretty special.
Yeah.
At the time, were they touting it as a great vintage, or was
61?
Yeah.
Oh, 61 was touted as one of the it was the vintage of the century.
And it's true.
And really was
well,
true.
I mean, I would. If you look at the 20th century, if I was going to pick a vintage of the 20th century, over the 61, I'd probably pick the 45s and maybe the 59s. And 61 was a great vintage in Bordeaux, and it was a good vintage in Burgundy. 59 was probably just a tad less than Bordeaux. In Burgundy, it was stunning. And in Germany, it made some killer German wines. And 45 was the right after the war. 45 Bordeaux are amazing wines. And Portugal, the ports in 45 were stunning. Just really, I drank a lot of those too.
And the 59 Germans are still probably good.
It was funny, when I was a student at Davis, we had the Davis Enology and Viticulture Organization. The acronym is DEVO. And we did. It was the student association. We did these like weekly wine tastings, or I don't know, weekly or monthly. I forget what it was, but I was invited to host one of these tasting for all my peers who were students at that time. And I say Jed went to school with Randall Graham and Clendenin and Mike Martini and all these guys. When I was there, it was Elias Hernandez, who went on to become the winemaker at Schaefer. Pat Howe was the assistant with Downeen Dyer at Domaine Chandon and was the grad student who really did the flavor wheel. Bob Blue, who started Bonterra for Fetzer. I mean, he started at San Martin Winery, but he went on to created organic wines for Fetzer back in the 80s as such. Stacy Clark was a winemaker for 25 years at Pine Ridge Winery, and now she's at Charles Krug Winery. I mean, there are these students, Mia Klein, a whole slew of these amazing students that were there at the time. And me, having grown up on the East Coast in Connecticut and Maine, mostly, the wine side of it was Connecticut. I grew up, I worked in the shop when we had the 73 Montelena Chardonnay and the 73 Stag's Leap Cabernet in our shop before the Paris tasting happened in 76. So we were doing the same type of tastings back then. I was learning about wine when my infancy in the wine business was tasting California wines side by side with European wines. California in 1975, 76, the first wines that I was tasting out of there were Chapelet and Freemark Abbey and Clos de Val, and then eventually Stag's Leap Wine Cellars and Heights and all these other things. So we were doing those kind of tastings back then when we were kids as such. So I go to California, and I said, there was this guy in Sacramento, Daryl Cordy, really, really cool wine shop in Sacramento, and he had these old German wines, Eidelsbacher Krauthauser Hofberg.
Gesundheit.
Yeah, and it goes in soft, comes out hard. It was this great Saar Ruver Mosel vineyard in the town of Eidelsbach, and the vineyard is Krauthauser Hofberg. And he had Auschleses from 1959, 64, 66, 69, and 71. And I bought a bunch of these to go taste with these students. And I was up in front of 200 people with 6 bottles each of these wines, teaching my peers about German wines. They didn't know anything about it. A lot of these were California kids that just knew California wines.
True.
And it was amazing to be able to share those kind of things at that time. Another time with the Devo group, our enology group, it was very cool. We had we did after we do these seminars, we invite winemakers or grape growers to educate us at Davis on a Monday night, and then we do a potluck dinner at Dr. Cornelius O, the chairman of the enology department, over at his house. And one of the times we had Francis Mahoney, my former soon-to-be boss at Carneros Creek Winery, had done the original research on clonal selection of Pinot Noir, the first ever research project on clonal variation, genetic mutations of any grape variety done in the country. From 1976 to 86, Carneros Creek Winery conducted through UC Davis on our property at Carneros Creek research on 20 different clones of Pinot Noir. So Francis came over and talked about this clonal selection, but at the same time, he brought over one of our grape growers, Nathan Fay. Nathan Fay was a Cabernet grower in the Stag's Leap area who had planted in 1961 Cabernet Sauvignon. He planted 80 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon in 1961, and that doubled the acreage of Cabernet Sauvignon at that time in Napa Valley.
Crazy.
1960, Napa Valley was known for walnuts and pears and almonds, and there were some grapes, but it was a whole lot different scene than it is today. There were a handful of wineries, but not many wineries. So Francis did his thing. Nathan did he did a presentation on his grape growing in the Stag's Leap area, and he brought 3 of his homemade wines over, his 68, his 73, and 74 homemade wines. 68 Nathan Fay homemade wine is the best Napa Valley Cabernet I've ever had, period. And it was the epiphany that caused Warren Winiarski to buy Stag's Leap Wine Cellars years later. Robert Mondavi, at the time in 1970, was buying grapes from Nathan Fay when Robert started his own winery, and Warren Winiarski was a cellar rat before he started Stag's Leap Wine Cellar at Robert Mondavi Winery. And Robert Mondavi turned Warren onto this vineyard and he said, shit, I gotta buy this. I gotta buy land over there someday. That was the wine that caused him to buy that land. And I got to drink the 68 with Nathan at the school there. And afterwards, I was like one of the host guides for Nathan. They asked me, hey, you help Nathan, give him, show him how to get over to Corny's house, Dr. O's house, to do this, barbecue afterwards, this potluck. So I ride over with Nathan. He's driving a 1964 XKE Jaguar. So I'm driving. I've been in Napa for a year, or at Davis for a year, and here I'm driving with one of the premier grape growers in Napa Valley in a 1964 XKE Jaguar over to Dr. O's house. And on the way over, I said, Nathan, man, those were great wines. I love the wine. Oh, Bill, come on over some. I'll give you some. So he gave me like 3 bottles each of his 68, his 73, his 74. I still have 73, 74, 76, 78, and 80 homemade wines in Nathan's.
Wow.
And you're welcome to come out and drink them. You can bring the thing here. We can talk about it, over there,
Be very careful what you wish for.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, we had an earthquake in Napa 2 years ago. I don't know if you heard about the earthquake in Napa.
Yeah,
It was like shiggled and shaken. I was up in my place in Maine at the time. It was pretty surreal because I'm up in Maine. I turn on NPR just to listen. We off the grid still up there. Still is today. 115 years later, we've had this property. My grandfather, my father's, what have you. And we have a battery-operated radio. It was Sunday morning. Turn on NPR, listen to the news. Oh, there was an earthquake in California, in Napa, just 8.5 miles southeast of Napa Valley. And I said, we don't know what the epicenter was or what the magnitude was, the Richter scale was, but it's significant enough to have it on national news. And I said, oh, that's my backyard. And I was out of town, and I said, oh, shit, I got some wines there that I don't want to see break, So, and I have a 2,000 bottle cellar, and I lost 7 bottles of wine. They were packed tightly well, and my vinyl album collection fell over and landed before the bottles did.
Any chance it was like Behringer White Zin?
No. No. There was 4 bottles of Steele wine that were sample bottles I had that were laying around, which I could replace easily. There was 3 bottles, though, that were... one of my classmates was Rudy von Strasser at UC Davis, Von Strasser Winery up on Diamond Mountain, and it was an 01 Cabernet from Diamond Mountain, which is a $100 bottle of Cabernet. I could replace that because I know Rudy, and he's an old deadhead buddy of mine. So but the other 2 were the rare ones. 1968 Inglenook Charbonneau. Which is, you just can't replace. But the last time I was here, didn't you break out an old Inglenook Charbonneau for me? You were the man. You're the man. You're the myth, the legend. And then the other one, everybody's going, a lot of wineries these days going to screw caps, these Stelvin screw caps. And I have no problem with that whatsoever. And one of the bottles I had, there was this winery back in the 50s and 60s. It was a cooperative winery over in Lodi, the other side of Sacramento, called Guild Winery. And somebody years ago had given me a bottle of Guild Zinfandel with a screw cap. It was non-vintage, but you looked at the bottom of the glass, and the mold, the glass said 1962. So the glass was made in 62. It was probably a 1960 Zinfandel with a screw cap.
Repurposed?
And what's that?
So the bottle was repurposed?
No. That was the original glass that was bottled. It was
so that was
it's an original.
It was a screw cap wine in 1960.
Wow.
1962, and it broke.
Wow.
I was in Maine when it happened. My daughter was out in Napa. She showed up at the house with a very dear friend of my old coworker, Melissa, and they cleaned up all the glass and stuff like that. And we got home, and they left all the pictures askew on the wall. What have you. But now I figure we've had earthquakes here. The epicenter was less than a quarter mile from my house, 6.0 earthquake. And but all the pressure, energy went north. I know people in downtown Napa and north of Napa that lost hundreds of bottles, and wineries that lost thousands of gallons. And I'm right where it happened, and it was just that point where it just didn't affect us.
Wow.
But I got to start drinking all this stuff up before the next earthquake. So bring it on, man! Bring it on! We'll show some love.
So 2 things real quick. Jeff, I'd like to apologize for all the names that Bill has dropped on your floor.
He can clean them up. He's got a broom.
And Bill, I'd love to thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Hey,
This
my
has been
pleasure.
great.
My pleasure.
We will
Very educational.
We will come bug you out and.
You should. We should do one on the West Coast on the back deck there and crank out wine from your birth years. I got plenty of wines going back
dear
to.
God.
I go back to 1928, and you guys aren't that old.
I'm
close, but
I've got cognacs to go back to 1914.
Oh
wow.
They were actually not bottled until 2000.
Chug.
Yeah. That almost requires an idea.
Okay. We'll close it up here.
Let's wrap this up.
Sorry to get diatribe.
No, it's been awesome.
This is great. So, is it steelewines.com?
SteeleWines.com. Jed Steele, owner, winemaker, family-owned biz. Come visit the winery. We're up in Kelseyville, California. Highway 29. Just go north of Calistoga, 20 miles. We're on the right. You can't miss us.
And again, that Malbec was
Malbec rocks.
That was my favorite.
The Catfish Zinfandel rocked. The Cuvée Chardonnay, Jed's best known Chardonnay rocked. It was all good.
So come visit winewarspodcast.com. We'll have links to the website, all the different wines you can come see, and we'll put some pictures up. Review us on iTunes. Visit us on Twitter at Wine Wars Podcast, and we'll link out to I believe it's just at Steele Wines.
Yeah, Steele Wines with an S. SteeleWines.com. Check us out.
Yeah. So that's it for this week. So until next time, remember,
it's just grape juice.